So a big yes to identity being shaped by place. I had this is a fantasy that calmed me for many years, and I thought this was a good idea. This has to do with identity, and that was that humans would construct a giant net that could be drawn through the earth. So it would be like a catapult, and one end would be located on the moon, and somehow this could all be done. And this net would be drawn through the earth, and all the people who didn't like animals would be caught in the net and flung into outer space. And somehow this calmed me, thinking about it, because looking after the earth and being kind to animals has always been such an integral part of myself. I think most people take their identity from place, but there are people who feel to me like aliens, who are, for one reason or another, impervious to their surroundings. And my new self-calming story is that those are the people who are satisfied to look at screens and not to be outdoors. And those are the people who want to go into space and who can have an ersatz life, can have a life that's not directly connected with nature, but are smart and can live on screen and develop all sorts of things, and can live in an artificial atmosphere, like in space, and I guess that was calming to me, to understand that not everybody really adores that tree or the way that flock of starlings, those hated birds, a murmuration of starlings, how they all swoop, and it's that not everyone responds to things like that. They're just different kinds of human beings. But I think most people do identify and take their identification from place. It may be offset a bit that it goes through family, because the family is there, through the human. Not everyone goes direct to the source, to nature, but because their family is from a certain place. And there are all those wonderful aspects of vernacular and habits of place, like winter. We hate it, but yet it brings us together. We know exactly what's going on the street. Everybody's shoveling, and there's this wonderful esprit de corps when I walk out the door with a shovel, and and everybody up and down the street happy to see one another, hating that another blizzard, and yet feeling proud. Yes, we survived it, and it's nothing to us. And all the, in the south of the U.S., they're yammering on about the polar vortex and the Canadian Arctic colds and all that Arctic cold system, but that's who we are. We know how to handle it. We don't flee it to centimeters of snow. And so that kind of identity, either out of adversity or because it's a beautiful place, can come either directly through environment or because the family talks or the community talks and shares that experience. There are particular places. I camped in the Mojave Desert off and on for 3 years in Southern California, Death Valley. It was at the edge of Death Valley, but I was in an oasis, and that place changed me. I never had been in a desert landscape. I'd grown up in more of this eastern woodlands or Atlantic Ocean, seaside, not that sere, incredible desert landscape. And yet where I was camped, where my tent was by a little creek in a little canyon, and there was water above ground, and that little creek flowed into the Amargosa River, which is quite a wide river in Death Valley. It flows underground for 18 miles. It's such an extraordinary river. And then it comes above ground. Well, they're creating wetlands, so there were all these birds and all these animals in a desert. And up in the surface of the desert was very dangerous. And I hiked every day, and I was running every day, and always carrying, learning to carry water. And so I learned about that unusual kind of place that most people don't like, and that an environment in which one could die easily if didn't carry enough water or know how to protect oneself. So that landscape really changed me, because I never thought I would like such a thing. And I have an intense attraction to not just that desert now, but I camped out in the Australian desert, sleeping in a sleeping bag under the stars in this bush, and feeling very much at home, not afraid of snakes or spiders or whatever, because knowing habits of animals and knowing how to protect myself or just walk carefully or that. So those kinds of that landscape, the desert landscape, is one that calls to me. And then there are others. My childhood geography was there were deciduous trees, not such a hard winter as Prince Edward Island, but 4 seasons. And North America. So it was fairly easy, not like a desert. But the childhood that I had was on a farm. So we had chickens and a cow, and I had a dog, and we had a cat, and a mother who encouraged us to go outside. So I was allowed outside a lot, and we all played outside. And the only rules were to be in earshot. And when we would hear our mother say, Pete, Deirdre, Patty, Nellie, we had to be able to hear that we had to come home for supper. And otherwise, if we knew long enough in between meals, we could range really far. Who is it that's the last child in the woods? The person who's written that book 2 years ago, anyway. The Last Child in the Woods. He's the person who came up with the name nature deficit disorder. I'm sorry I don't remember it, but nature deficit disorder. I ask the students in my classes, how far could they range when they were children? And were they allowed to cross the street? No. But they could go down the block, or they could go to the next, depending on the age. I could range many kilometers as long as I was back for supper or whatever was agreed upon. And the students in my class, the 18 or 19-year-olds in my class, say yes, but their parents could go all the way back to that back field and over to the creek, and now they see that their little brothers or little sisters, or some of the mature students have children of their own. No, my children go in the yard only. And that there's a huge difference, how far a child can roam and have independent encounters with the natural world, with weather, with animal, with trees, and all that flora, fauna stuff. It's quite different now. When I was a child, I roamed. My ranging area was huge, and so I learned how to be in the world separate from family and separate from rules. I didn't have to mind. If I fell out of a tree, I took care of myself. It really hurt, then I could go cry home. I never did. Unless someone really got hurt, there was no going home and crying. Just get over it. So I think that's why J.K. Rowling's books are so wonderful for readers now, is that Hogwarts has, once the students are out of class, they can roam, and they have no rules. They're on their own. They're not in the natural world, but they have this wonderful Hogwarts school.